according to a US psychologist called Dr. Phil Zimbardo. He's here, along with gamers Nick Whitcroft and Sam McKenna and Julian Benson, and they're already debating away. Welcome all of you. And also with us in Oxford is Dr. Andrew Przybylski from the Oxford Internet Institute, which looks at the impact the internet has on society. Gentlemen, welcome. Phil Zimbardo, then, your book is Man Disconnected. What's your theory?
It's not a theory, it's an alarm. We're sending an alarm that there's a crisis in the making in the UK, in America, in Poland, other countries, where young boys are failing academically, they're failing socially, having no friends, and they're failing sexually. And that's a killer triad. And what we point out is that video games and watching video games to excess in social isolation, and now watching freely available pornography in excess in social isolation, is a killer combination that is contributing to this inadequate school performance. Boys are dropping out of school, doing poorly when they're there. And what confounds the whole thing is a large percentage of boys are growing up for the first time without a father in home.
Okay.
Because of divorce, separation, fathers traveling, living in other countries.
All right, well, Nick,
So
Sam and Julian...
It's a grim picture.
It's a grim picture, you say.
I say.
Nick, Sam and Julian all spent many hours over the years online. Certainly gaming. I have no idea about free online pornography. But what do you say to Philip's theory, Julian?
Well, certainly, I think that there are going to be examples of people who do play games in severe isolation, and that almost to a point of an obsession. But then that's not something which is unique to video games. And certainly, it's that this.
What else? What else?
Well, for instance, you could spend hours upon hours watching films, reading books. I mean, some of our greatest writers and directors are people who are socially isolated themselves in their youth to obsess over a particular medium. But also, I think that your description of video games is it's an out-of-date stereotype. And for instance, there simply aren't people playing in that manner anymore. Like, it's sort of, there are single-player games, and there are people who will play on their own, but there's so many people who play almost exclusively online. There are people who play socially together. There are people who go to watch events together, and crowds of thousands of people going to see a game being played live.
But you're specifically saying it's people doing it on their own,
no, that's
is it?
wonderful. Yeah, it's people doing it, it's boys doing it on their own in their room.
Why doesn't it affect girls in the same way?
Because video games are designed, video games and pornography are designed for guys. That it's excitement, it's the aggression, it's the violence. And so there's lots of research that show why girls, in fact, we did a survey in the UK of 67 high school students, and we asked that, and girls say, you know, it's not appealing to us. I mean,
all right, well, let's see what Sam and Nick say as well.
It's not in the way it's currently configured.
What would you say to Philip?
I think I kind of agree with that, actually, because if you're on your own, you're not seeing people. It's very antisocial. But like you said, you know, most of the things nowadays, when you're playing games, they are online with other people. So I'm not so sure about the large numbers that could apply to today. I definitely see.
No, but when you're online with other people, but they're not physically present. You're not talking to them. They're just other players in the universe.
You are talking to them, actually, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry, go on.
Something that's quite interesting as well. I mean, is you talk in obviously I haven't had a chance to read the book. We were kind of contacted fairly short notice, but the blurb kind of goes and talks about not only actually the negatives, but also the fact that gaming can often be regarded as less demanding than other social endeavours, and actually that is a strength and a weakness. I have friends, for example, who have experienced deep depression, who have actually used video games as a way of reopening themselves into social circles, as opposed to vice versa.
That is a wonderful example of the potentially positive effect.
Yes,
and I agree.
Andrew
as well.
Absolutely.
Sorry, yeah. Dr. Andrew Przybylski, welcome to you from the Oxford Internet Institute. What do you think of what Dr. Phil Zimbardo is saying this morning?
Well, I think a lot of what Philip is sharing is pretty much common sense. There are definitely things that we should be keeping our eyes on when it comes to new technologies, but a lot of the critique could have just as easily been applied to rock music or comic books. There's really an issue of causation versus correlation. There might be some people who are predisposed to social isolation who might be playing games alone, but the causal evidence really is not there. We have about 25 years of brain research and large-scale research with young people, boys and girls, and the evidence really shows that the effects, for good or bad, are very, very small. We're talking 1% of a young person's well-being or functioning has anything to do with either social media or gaming.
Yeah, okay, I disagree with that. We have lots of data in our book, Man Disconnected, which challenges that view, and it's not like rock music or comic books. Video gaming is a multi-million-dollar industry. Pornography is a multi-million-dollar industry. So these are industries that have to attract consumers, and they're constantly making the games more enchanting, more
so Dr.
fascinating.
Zimbardo, I would argue that the rock industry also tries to get people's attention, and so did Victorian novels.
Yeah.
The thing that's important to understand is that there are comprehensive reviews. This country has the Byron Report, which was a comprehensive review of all forms of media and young people. The Australian government has one, and these basically, while there are some exceptions, there is some data to indicate that there are some edge cases. When you look at the evidence comprehensively, this looks like part of modern childhood. Anything in excess, whether you're a sports fan or a video game fan, when it's not about the activity itself, when it's about something else complicated that's going on with a young person, then it can have some negative effects.
Yeah, I think you're underestimating the impact that these things are having right now on our youth, and I'm saying it's compounded with boys not having a father at home who sets standards, who sets limits, and I think most parents are unaware of the extent to which children are spending their time doing that. Video game.
Well, Ofcom research in this country shows that at least parents in Great Britain are very well aware of a wide range of risks, and they use what are called mediation strategies, different ways of setting rules about time and content, and most feel empowered by what's going on right now. What you're highlighting are potential risks. So it might be the case that something has a negative effect, but the causal evidence is not there. Compared to something like poverty or mental health care access, real problems with young people, or things like self-injurious behavior or anorexia, which actually are on the rise with young people in this country, something like video games and the evidence base just isn't there.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so
are you accepting what he's
saying? No,
saying?
I'm not accepting that at all. I'm saying now there may be some differences in the UK than in the United States. We've studied obviously much more in depth in the United States, but there are recent studies of the brain, and to the extent that boys play in excess, there are studies Leonard Sachs has a book, Boys Adrift, and he reports on the negative effects on the brain, on the nucleus accumbens, on the reward center of the brain, of playing video games. That's not a correlation. That's a direct impact.
No, it literally is a correlation, because there's not an experimental procedure. There's no evidence that there's an enduring change. I could show someone a picture of a naked woman. I could have someone fall asleep and wake up, and you would find differences in the brain, in many important brain regions. Yeah. This doesn't mean necessarily that we're looking at something different than a comic book, rap music, or pizza.
Well,
can I ask Julian and Sam and Nick here, the age you began going online and playing stuff, and how many hours you spent as a teenager, and how many hours you spend now?
And this is, I guess, probably the key question where we demonstrate that actually gaming is all about moderation and finding it as something that takes a place in your life. I mean, for me, and the same with Julian and Sam, gaming isn't the be-all and end-all of our lives. So actually, when you ask how much do we play, it will vary depending on week. We have jobs, we have other hobbies, and therefore
this week, for example, with Thursday, how many hours?
This week I've had no internet and no computer because I've been moving flat. So actually, it's been none at all. So that's a poor example.
That's a poor example. Last week.
Last week maybe kind of 3 to 4 hours or so. Other times it could be 20 hours. You never know.
Sure.
It's entirely dependent on where it fits into your life, and the same as any other social
Nick,
activity.
In terms of you, would you acknowledge any particular negative impact on you if you spent 20 hours on it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not talking about back-to-back. We're talking about the...
Sure, the total over a week, yeah.
That would be making up for a time where, you might not have other things on. You might be, it's towards the end and you haven't hit payday yet, and you don't particularly want to go out and spend, £5 a pint in the pub, and you've got, a load of games sitting at home, and you've got an easy way of socialising with friends across nations. Can
I ask, when you were teenagers, did your parents worry about the time you were online?
Not so much online, actually, on the system itself. I mean,
right,
we went through a phase, not a phase, well, So maybe a lot of children went through this, where your parents would like kind of ban you for a bit.
Yeah,
and so then,
I'm at that phase. Yeah.
And
Basically, said that
I might have
parents would
experienced
ban
that
you
as
for-
well.
Yeah, isn't it? If we spent too much time on it in a particular time, or we're up too late when they told us not to be, they'd say, all right, you can't play for 2 or 3 days, and then we'd be like, not really upset, you know. We'd find other things to do, but then it wasn't like a huge problem.
But how would they know how much you were playing?
We'd be in a room, and there's only one thing you'd probably be doing in a certain room with the games console and the TV. Basically.
Yeah, and this is the
But
very
they would come
important
into your
thing.
room?
Sorry, Andrew, do come in.
Yeah, what's most important here is that the lines of communication stay open between young people and parents,
Yeah.
so that parents can explain why a rule is important and maybe sit down and play games with their young person.
Yeah.
Our work indicates that more than half of British parents and somewhere around 33% of American parents actually play video games with their under 18s. And so this can really offer, it's not just about the negatives, this can offer a collaborative, positive experience that can move its way into the classroom even. And so you really have to ask, are there hard and fast rules? Are we just talking about turning it off and trying to put the genie back in the bottle? Or are we talking about productive solutions that kind of understand that this is part of modern childhood?
Okay.
Now that I
Let me
agree
read
with. In our book, we have solutions, and this what he just said, what Andrew just said is part of what we see as a solution for parents. So we say, what do parents have to do? What do the media have to do to change the image of men? And what do schools have to do? One of the problems we see, which is confusing, is schools are now, at least in America, for girls. Girls are doing better than ever. Girls are on the rise. But 9 out of 10 school teachers in primary school are women. And what we show is there's data that they have a bias against boys, that the kind of things that women teachers promote are the fine-tuning that girls do. And when teachers evaluate, let's say, essays anonymously, boys' scores go up by 30%.
Okay. Okay, let me read some messages. It's particularly about gaming, actually. Layla on Twitter says, it's nonsense that girls aren't playing video games. Lots of girls like playing video games, and the numbers are only increasing as games move online. Charlie on Twitter, I'm a female gamer. I spend as much time playing games as any of my brothers, and we're all social about it. Rachel on Twitter says, the prof's views are based on an outdated view of gaming and gaming culture. And Matthew on Twitter says, the prof's wrong. I'm sorry. Matthew doesn't agree with you. My research shows that men and boys are simply reframing their identities in the light of contemporary demands. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Thank you too. Thank you, Nick and Julian. And Andrew, many thanks for your time.
Anytime.
Coming up shortly, people with Down syndrome tell us about the barriers they face when looking for work. We'll be speaking to the actress Sarah Gordy, who's appeared in BBC One's Call the Midwife, and others with Downs who are struggling.